Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I have entitled this talk, Can One Be Secular and Muslim? And this title, this whole subject really emerged out of a letter that I saw one day from the editor, or from a colleague of mine at Howard University, to the editor of the New York Times. And this colleague of mine started out the letter by saying, I am a secular Muslim. That was the very first thing he said in the letter, was I am a secular Muslim. And I wondered about that. I wondered what he meant by that. And it led me to do a little more investigating of the whole idea of secularism, the meaning of the word secular, the agenda of those who profess to be secularists, and the implications of the process of secularization for the Muslim world. Now, as we know, the Muslim Ummah today faces a number of challenges to its overall well-being. We can talk about poverty, famine, illiteracy, technological backwardness, decaying infrastructures. These are in many respects the defining characteristics in virtually every country that claims a Muslim majority. Despite these material deficits in the Muslim Ummah's overall quality of life, however, a much greater threat to its continued existence is at hand. And this threat represents a comprehensive challenge to the legitimacy of the Holy Quran as a source of law for Muslims, and to the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a pattern on which to build the Islamic life in an Islamic society. This threat is the process of secularization, a process that is viewed by its adherents, those who believe in secularization, as evidence of the human being's evolution from superstition to rational thought. And it's important to constantly keep that in mind, that the secularists view their worldview as a stage of evolution from superstition to rational thought. Now, this threat to the Ummah is profound, not because of the strength of intellectual argument supporting secularization, but because the advocates of secularization have the economic and military wherewithal to force compliance with their worldview. It's not about the process being intellectually strong, being an intellectually strong argument for secularization. Now we have a situation where those who believe in this process can force others to comply. Now, I'd like to address briefly four basic questions that are essential to any discussion of the relationship between Muslims and secularization. First of all, what is secularization? We have to be clear on our definition. Secondly, How has the Muslim mind become secularized? Thirdly, and this is basically the title of the presentation, can one be both secular and Muslim? And finally, what kind of methodology should we employ for desecularizing the Muslim mind? In other words, taking the Muslim mentality away from this process of secularization. What is secularization? And notice that I'm using the word secularization as opposed to simply secular or secularism. Okay. Secularization is a process. It is a process that is ongoing. Now, the Dutch theologian Cornelius van Persen has defined secularization as the deliverance of the human being, and I would like to quote him, the deliverance of the human being first from religious and then from metaphysical control over his reason and language, unquote. Stuffing up. And let me repeat that. From the theologian, Dutch theologian Van Persen, secularization is the deliverance of the human being, quote, first from religious and then from metaphysical control over his reason and language, unquote. He goes on to state that secularization is, quote, the loosing of the world from religious and quasi-religious understandings of itself, the dispelling of all closed worldviews, the breaking of all supernatural myths and sacred symbols, the defatalization of history, the discovery by man that he has been left with the world on his hands, that he can no longer blame fortune or the Furies for what he does with it, unquote. And he goes on to say, secularization is, quote, man turning his attention from the world beyond and toward this world and this time, unquote. With secularization comes, quote, the disappearance of religious determination of the symbols of cultural integration, unquote. He says it suggests, quote, and I know I'm quoting him liberally, but I think it's important to get this from an authority in this whole process of definition. It suggests, quote, a historical process, and listen to this, almost certainly irreversible, in which society and culture are delivered from tutelage to religious control and closed metaphysical worldviews, unquote. According to Van Persen and others, secularization is comprised of three integral and interrelated components. And I'll just list them before I define them. First of all, the disenchantment of nature. Secondly, the desecularization of politics. And thirdly, the deconsecration of values. Now, what do we mean by these? Okay, first of all, the disenchantment of nature. This involves dispelling any notion that nature may be defined or controlled by divine or supernatural sources. This disenchantment of nature, dispelling these notions that there may be any divine or supernatural control over the natural process. Thus, the human being is free to act upon natural phenomena and the environment in a manner unconstrained by religiously determined parameters. The desacralization of politics involves abolishing any legitimation of political power derived from sacred sources. Thus, the natural process of political change is based solely on human reasoning. Finally, the deconsecration of values involves the human being's realization that values and beliefs are relative, that historical change necessarily involves a change in values over time. There are therefore no eternal values. Repeat, there are therefore no eternal values. Now again, secularization is viewed as an evolutionary process, a process through which the human being moves from infantile, immature notions of God's will, prophecy, and revelation